How do I get paid as a realtor and exactly what do I do? If you've ever wondered what realtors do other than open doors and forward some emails and fill out some paperwork, if you've ever wondered why 6% is a typical ask when you're trying to sell your house, if you've ever wondered why it's a percentage instead of a flat fee, if you've ever wondered how a realtor justifies asking that much, stick around. I'm going to answer those questions in the most forward, transparent way a realtor ever has. By the way, my name is Christopher McGee. I am the owner of Halcyon Real Estate. We are affiliated with the Keller Williams, Utah Market Center here in Salt Lake City. I think transparency around this issue is absolutely critical. In fact, a lack of transparency around exactly this issue seeded a national class action lawsuit a few years ago. And in fact, I actually did a video about that lawsuit settlement. I read the settlement and I talked about what it all entailed and what it meant for change in real estate. I did all that in a video as soon as the settlement came out a few years ago. We'll flag that video at the top of the screen so you can check that out if that's something you want to check out. But with that being said, let's jump right into it. Okay, here's how it works. If you hire me to represent you in getting your home sold, you and I are going to sit down and we will negotiate a percentage of the proceeds of that sale as my commission. It is negotiable. That's important. If anybody's ever told you anything else, they are lying or they don't understand. And that is how I get paid as a realtor. It's an agreement with you, the seller, that my brokerage will get paid a certain percentage of the commission, or rather a certain percentage of the proceeds of the sale as my commission. It is negotiable. It has never not been negotiable. And that was actually one of the things that got brought up in that class action lawsuit a few years back that I mentioned. A lot of people understood that it was not negotiable. When the settlement dictated that it had to be clearly communicated to the clients of realtors, the commission was in fact negotiable, it was reported on as if now it's negotiable and it wasn't anymore. And that was incorrect. It's always been negotiable. How transparent a realtor is in that communication with you has been the difference. Now, the agent that represents you to sell your home, the listing agent, has commonly asked for 3%. And then they've also asked for 3%, another 3% to be made available to be paid to the agent that represents the buyer in this transaction. That has been common. It has never, ever, ever been a rule. And in fact, I've worked for 3% and I've worked for various things other than 3%. I've worked for 2.5%, I've worked for 2% in situations where, and there are realtors who will say, I'm shooting myself in the foot by telling you this, but I don't believe transparency and honesty is ever shooting oneself in the foot. There have been scenarios where someone only lived in their home for 2 years. Across that 2-year period of time, the market didn't appreciate much, if at all. And therefore they didn't have much equity in the home that they needed to now sell. And in that scenario where it just cannot be a win for them to sell their home and give me 3% and the other agent 3%, I've negotiated for me. I negotiated on their behalf for me to just take 1%. And then I negotiated for the buyer's agent to take 1% as well. It's not a blanket rule that I take a certain amount of commission, although I will usually lead with, I'm looking for 3% commission. And I'll get into the nuts and bolts of why. But again, if you've ever worked with a realtor who made you believe otherwise, that it was not the rule, or that it was the rule, I should say, for them to take 3% and for a buyer agent to take 3% as well, they were lying to you or they were misinformed. Now, a lot of people wonder how and why the seller is paying another 3% to the buyer's agent. The buyer's agent doesn't represent the seller, right? So how did this come about? It came about because it used to be that if you hired a realtor, it was because you were selling your home. The only time you would ever use a realtor was because you were selling a home, not because you were buying one. And if I recall right, it'd be interesting to double check the data on this, but if I recall right, in the early 90s, I think it was, buyers started to feel like, yo, we're having to go up against a professional negotiator and we don't have anybody representing us in our best interest. Let's get somebody to represent me, the buyer, to talk to the professional negotiator who represents the seller. I feel like I could otherwise be getting taken advantage of in this situation because it is the listing agent's job to look out for the best interest of the seller. Now, if I'm selling my home and I'm about to be flush with the cash from the proceeds of that sale, where the buyer is forking out all the money to be able to buy the home, it's very, very difficult for a buyer who's forking out all the money to be able to also fork out the money to pay for their agent, their realtor. And so this principle of what we call cooperative compensation became the typical norm, where from the proceeds of the sale, both agents would be paid. In fact, let me show you the contract language right here. This is the listing agreement between me, my brokerage, and you, my client, if we're looking to get your home sold. So I want to show you the contract language precisely here. So this is the exclusive right to sell listing agreement and agency disclosure. This is the contract that you sign with a realtor that you plan on having them represent you in the process of getting your home sold. And you can see at the top, it lists the parties involved. It lists how long I'm going to be representing you for. It specifies the property that I'm going to be representing you for. And then in section 2, it gets to the brokerage compensation bit. And there's a few blanks there, right? There's a few blanks that we're gonna fill out. We're gonna negotiate what works, what's a win for both of us. By the way, this is not my listing agreement contract. This is the Utah Division of Real Estate approved form for this specific contract. Any realtor, unless they've come up with something on their own, any realtor you use in Utah is going to be using this precise contract. Okay, and in section 2, there's a few blanks. And the first one, 2.1, talks about the seller's brokerage fee. So if I represent you, this is the fee you agree to pay my brokerage for me executing on the job of representing you. Then in section 2.2, you can see that there's a blank for a percentage and there's another blank for a dollar amount. And the commission is typically thought of as the percentage. The only reason the dollar amount is there is because, you can take that as an option and just put down a flat fee. But what a lot of agents do is charge a transaction fee on top of their commission. And they don't tell you necessarily that they're going to be doing that unless they fill this out in front of you, which they should. If they filled this out and sent it to you and just said, hey, I'll send you the paperwork over DocuSign or some other platform, and you just need to sign it in order to get me working on representing you selling your home, and you don't read it, they should be going over it with you carefully. But if they just send it to you and you don't read it, then you might not see that this is a thing, and they'll ask for a percentage of commission. And then some agents will ask for a transaction fee dollar amount on top of that. And the way they justify that is they're saying, well, I pay a transaction coordinator to do XYZ for me, or I pay somebody in my business to do this XYZ, whatever it is. And I'm just asking for a commission plus that on top of it so that my commission has more profit. And just so you know, I never do that. I'm just asking for the commission. I've never asked for a transaction fee on top of it. But section 2.2 brings up the point of what happens if I represent you and a buyer comes and they are unrepresented by their own agent. There's a spot where I can say I'm asking for more commission in this event, that there's an unrepresented buyer. Usually I put 0% here, but there are times when, particularly right after I've represented a seller and then had to also help an unrepresented buyer, there are times when I've asked for 1% on top of it. Chances are we won't get an unrepresented buyer. But in the event I am working with you and it is my job to represent your best interests and we get an unrepresented buyer, what happens is I end up doing all the work for that unrepresented buyer that their agent would be doing for them, and making sure I don't compromise my loyalty to you and your best interests at all. And so it puts me in a weird position where I'm answering the phone to them all hours of day and night. I'm filling out all their paperwork. I'm doing everything their agent would do, but I don't represent them, and it can put me in a weird spot. And so in order to navigate that best and for the stress of navigating that well, I have asked for 1% on top of the 3% I typically ask for. But there's a space for that in this listing agreement, just so you know. And then in section 2.3, there's this about the seller authorizes us to offer a percentage of commission as the buyer's brokerage fee. Now, just so you know, how I negotiate that is to choose to leave it blank at the time that we are signing this agreement. We can leave it blank if we want. That doesn't mean you refuse to give any commission to the buyer's agent, but it also means that you aren't locked in at the time of offering compensation to the buyer's agent to whatever you wrote in this contract. That means we can use it as a point of leverage if we don't like something else about the offer that's been turned in. So if a buyer's agent turns something in and me pulling the lever of, well, you're asking for 3% commission, how about you take 2.5% or 2% or whatever we decide it needs to be to offset something else we don't like about the offer that they made? That's a lever that I want available to me, and so I usually choose to leave this blank. I must tell you though that I don't advise refusing to pay the buyer agent's commission, and here's why. Not only am I often someone who represents a buyer and I'm hoping to get paid for the work that I do, but particularly in Utah and particularly for most people, the overwhelming majority of people trying to buy a home, unless you're buying a multi-million-dollar home in Utah, which there are several, but unless you're that demographic, then chances are you feel stretched buying a home anyway. And if you're forking out all the money, it's just what I said, the principle of cooperative compensation that I described earlier. If I can't pay my agent for the work they're doing to get me this house, then I can't get this house. And as a seller, you're severely limiting the number of buyers who are able to make an offer on your house by refusing to pay any brokerage compensation to the buyer's agent at all. All right, now why 3%? Who came up with this number and why did it become the standard? And to be honest, I don't know how or why that became a typical norm. I don't need it to be a typical norm. And let's actually talk about what goes into the value an agent should be offering you. Number one, knowing the market, or as some of us in my market center like to say, being the local economist. That is not just knowing what homes are going for. You can find that on Zillow without a problem. It's also the direction the market is moving as a result of recent trends and understanding what forward-looking data to look at and tracking it week over week over week. And that means I need to know what the local market's current supply of homes looks like. I need to know exactly what the current market's demand looks like and how that's measured. I need to understand what factors within the local market and nationally affect the supply and demand of my local market in order to give you a solid understanding of what to expect in the very near future as you aim to get your home sold. I need to understand what the behavior of home buyers looks like in this market right now in order to help you understand what to expect as we receive offers on your home. None of that information is available on Zillow. It's information I have because I make it my business to be the local economist in my market. It is my lived experience to be in the minute details of real estate transactions day in and day out. Aside from knowing the right now market, I have a checklist of things that I make sure I do for you that makes the transaction go smoothly, that makes you feel like you push the easy button in the course of me representing you to get your home sold. In fact, let's look at it. Okay, I'm gonna read you this checklist right off of my app. I had this app created to, among other things, help me keep your transaction process streamlined and smooth, help you feel like you push the easy buttons. So let me just read this from top to bottom. This is the checklist of things I make sure to do in the event that I represent you as a seller. So first thing I'm gonna do is actually send you a questionnaire. And in that questionnaire, there's gonna be obviously a bunch of questions that help me understand what's important to you in the process of this sale, and also just a little bit about you, because I wanna know how to relate to you, I wanna know the best way to communicate with you, and I wanna know a couple of things that you like, and I'll get to why that matters toward the bottom of this checklist. I'm gonna have a pre-listing video call or sit-down meeting with you in order to go over some of the questions that you answered in that questionnaire, in order for me to explain and lay out transparently everything that's in the contract you will be signing for me to represent you and for me to educate you on the market. So I'm going to bring to that meeting a comparative market analysis and a net sheet of what I expect you to net in the event that we sell at the price point range that I expect you to sell at. We're going to come to a data-based decision on our go-to-the-market price of your home. And we need to get this exclusive right to sell contract and agreement signed. That's everything on the checklist prior to me actually representing you. Once we've got this signed and I've given you all this education and information and we can get the ball rolling on me working for you and representing you, there's a bunch of things I need to do in order to get the listing ready to go on the market. I'm gonna determine the timelines of getting your home cleaned, staged if necessary, and the photography that we're gonna get done, how long we're going to be before we get to the market, and when that first open house, first time on the market is going to occur. I need to know when the home is cleaned and ready to be staged. I need to know when the home is staged and ready for photos. By the way, I hire the stagers usually, and I hire the photographer always. We're gonna make sure we get your home shining in its best light for its debut on the market. I'm gonna get an MLS input form completed. I'm gonna have the photography uploaded so that when we're ready to go live on the market, it's already all the pictures are there, all the information about your property is there for people to see on the MLS and on every third-party platform, including like Realtor.com, Redfin, Zillow, all of those. I'm gonna make sure I get a sign in the yard. I'm gonna make sure I get a secure, we call it a Supra lockbox key. It's an electronic key lockbox that only realtors can access. We want that on the property so that when buyer agents who represent buyers are showing their clients your property, they have a way to get in. I have a way to track who got in, and I have a way to track who was in your home when, and you can understand why that's important for security. Okay, then we're gonna put the property live on the MLS. The next thing on the list is aligned showings in order. Aligned showings is the platform through which agents schedule showings at listed homes. And I'm gonna make that platform, I'm gonna get it in order so that it's streamlined. All you will have to do in order to schedule a showing, you don't schedule the showing. Somebody else or I will schedule the showing, and we do it through that platform in a way that you just get a text that says, somebody wants to see your home on this day at this time. All you have to do is text yes or no, or actually just Y or N to say whether that day or time works for you, and that's it. We're gonna make sure that you as the seller get the seller's disclosures form completed so that when we go under contract, that's ready to be handed over to the buyer. It's everything you know about the material facts of the condition of your property. As soon as your home goes live on the MLS, I'm going to door knock through the neighborhood, if that's all right with you, to make sure all your neighbors know that your home is for sale. And if they have any family or friends that might be interested in moving into the area, now's a good time for them to check out the home. I'm gonna schedule an open house tactically. For the first open house we do, there will be no showings allowed at the home until after that first open house that I call a grand opening. And what that does is, for anybody who sees it once it hits the market on Wednesday or Thursday, anybody who sees it who's interested in it and wants to schedule a showing, they won't be able to schedule a showing until after that first open house. And what that'll do is cause a lot of them to come to the open house instead of scheduling a private showing. And that will flood the open house with more interested buyers, increasing the sense of competition and increasing the urgency that anybody might have to make an offer on your home. Every week, I'm going to be checking in with you as often as you like, but at least once a week. I'm going to be checking in with you to let you know how things are going with the marketing and the level of attention we're getting on your home. And then when we get offers, I will go over them with you in detail to make sure there's no pitfalls in these offers, there's no scams, there's no predatory practices in these offers, because those exist. Offers like that get made on most homes, just so you know. Once we're under contract, I'm going to make sure the seller disclosure forms that you filled out earlier get delivered. I'm going to make sure that the earnest money that the buyer put forward on your home gets placed in the brokerage account. So I'll confirm that that earnest money was received. I'll make sure we're on top of the due diligence deadline, and I'll make sure that whatever the buyers are coming to you, the seller, asking for as a result of their home inspection during their due diligence period, I'm gonna make sure that we negotiate in your best interest instead of getting nickeled and dimed over every little thing that they want you to fix or reduce your price on. If your home was staged, I'll at this point make sure that we schedule the removal of the staging. I'll be on top of the financing and appraisal deadline. I'm gonna be reaching out to the buyer's lender to make sure that there's a deadline by which time the appraisal is done and the financing is wrapped up and in order. I'm gonna make sure things are in order for you. At this point, towards the end of your time being under contract, we're getting closer to closing on the sale of your home. Now I want to order a meaningful closing gift for you. And that's why in the questionnaire at the beginning, I wanted to know things about you. I'm gonna ask in that questionnaire, like, what's your favorite place to go out to eat? Because I might take you there for closing. It can be whatever place you want it to be. It could be Taco Bell, it could be Ruth's Chris, whatever you want. In the questionnaire, I'm gonna ask like what kind of books you like. If you like books, I might get you an excellent book that's along the lines of what you like for a closing gift, something like this. This is why I send out that questionnaire with a few personal questions. I'm gonna make sure if this is a new build that we get the clear to close, or as they say, a C2C, a CTC, in time for the scheduled settlement deadline. And I'm gonna make sure we make the settlement deadline. Once we go to settlement, I'm gonna make sure that the sale of the property was appropriately funded and recorded. I'm gonna remove my sign, I'm gonna remove my super key box from the home, and I'm gonna deliver to you the keys. And the buyer's agent will then deliver the keys to the new owner of your home that you've sold. Kind of a long list. Thanks for bearing with me as I went through it. That doesn't necessarily represent everything that I will do in the course of working for you as a seller, and just know that there's an equally long list for what I do for you if I represent you when you're looking to buy a home. But obviously it's not just opening doors. Okay, so in the end, I solve the problem of helping you get your home sold when you need it sold for a price that holds appropriate value in whatever the current market may be, while ensuring that none of the legal pitfalls, the scams, the predatory practices, none of it touches you. And I aim to do it in a way that makes you feel like you pushed the easy button. So the reason it makes sense for me to charge a percentage commission on the proceeds of the sale instead of a flat fee is because the size of the problem I'm solving is in direct proportion to the market value of the home. The higher the value of the home, the worse the financial consequences will be if you fall prey to the predatory practices, the common oversights made in real estate, the scams, any of it. So it's a bigger problem to solve, and I'm saving you from bigger problems if the perceived market value of the home is higher. I want you to understand as well that whatever we agree my commission will be is not my take-home profit. There's a brokerage split. You'll notice in the contract, it wasn't a percentage commission that comes to the realtor. It's a percentage commission that goes to the brokerage. And the brokerage will then take a percentage of that and then give the remainder of that percentage to the agent that worked on the transaction and represented you. Again, for transparency, there's a different brokerage split in every brokerage, okay? In Keller Williams, I take home about 60 to 65% of that commission until I've paid about $20,000 to the brokerage from them taking 30 to 35% of my commissions. And once I've given about that $20,000, then for the rest of the remaining roll around year, my commission, I get 100% of it at Keller Williams. But I'm gonna pay MLS dues, I'm gonna pay realtor dues. Every sign that I have that points people to an open house or says that a house is for sale, I have to pay for it. Those lock boxes, the super key lock boxes I described, about $100 each. And if I've got multiple listings, several $100s on multiple listings. Like I said, I pay for the photos, I pay for the staging. That's a couple $1,000s at least right there. Sometimes I offer to pay for cleaning the home, and sometimes I offer to pay for random handyman services that happen. Also, if I'm running a business, I've got employees and I'm paying them every month or for whatever work they do. So the commission is not 100% mine, and it's important for you to understand that. People think that you're taking 3% on a medium priced home in Salt Lake County right now. That's gonna be somewhere along the lines of $15,300, okay? I'm not taking home $15,300, not after everything that I just had to pay for. Not even close. And so it's important for you to understand that not all realtors make it in the business of being in real estate. There's a huge revolving door in real estate. The revolving door is something to the effect of 80% of people who got their realtor's license 2 years later aren't doing real estate. Because a lot of people get into real estate thinking it's going to be easy money, and it is not easy money. It's a significant sum of money when you're doing it and when you're doing it well and when you're solving the problems right. But if you're going to do it well and if you're going to provide the service that you should as a full service real estate agent, then it's just as difficult as running any other business. You're wearing all the hats. You're the marketer, you're the closer, you're the economist, you're the tech that's the customer relations person. You're everything. And you're wearing all those hats, and if you're not doing it well, the business fails. Okay, so where is the value actually in hiring a realtor, and are they worth the money? Well, to be frank, some are, and a lot of them are not. Well, it's not in how attractive they are, although I've been told I look all right. It's not in how sociable or connected they are, although I wouldn't consider myself a slob in those areas either. It's in how well they understand the market, the right now market that's local to you and where you're selling your home. It's in their analysis of the data they take the time to track. It's in how transparent they're gonna be with you. It's in how loyal they are to your best interests. It's in their ability to help you avoid costly mistakes. It's in their ability to help you maximize the outcome of what is likely to be the largest transaction in your life. So to answer the question, are realtors worth what they charge? The question to answer that question, of course, becomes who are you going to decide to work with and how are you going to make that decision? If all they are doing is opening doors for you, forwarding some emails and filling out some paperwork, then I would absolutely 100% agree with the sentiment that they are overpriced. That is a quote unquote discount brokerage. And if you've heard of a discount brokerage, it is somebody that you can hire to get your home sold for way cheaper than a full service realtor, or at least they'll market themselves as being way cheaper than a full service realtor. But there's surprisingly little that we are required legally to do in order to fulfill our obligations as being realtors to you. And when you hear discount brokerage, what you shouldn't think is somebody who gives the full service for less of a charge, because that's not what they do. It's a minimal service brokerage. Right? Like if you go to Costco and you get a huge pallet of something that you would normally get in single quantities, then per unit, it's less expensive. And that is a discount for the same product, right? But if you go to a discount brokerage, just so you know, you are not going to get the same product. You are not going to get the same level of service that I've outlined here. But if your realtor that you decide to work with is doing everything that I have outlined here, then their fee isn't the cost of the transaction so much as it is the investment in getting the transaction done well. Thanks for watching. And of course, if you are in Utah or looking to move here, hit me with any of your questions, all of your questions. So that's it, you guys. That's how I get paid as a realtor. If you have any questions that I didn't touch on in the course of this video, please feel free to hit me. That was a long slog of a video, but hopefully your curiosity brought you through it. And if you're looking for an agent to team up with, you know I'll be happy to help. Thanks for watching this one, guys. We'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.